Welcome to Big Closet, Small Planet, made possible with the generous support from the C&A Foundation, the H&M Foundation, the Rylander Foundation, and Tencel. I'm Mike Schrager. Many leading thinkers and scientists argue now that we need to globally cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 in order to stay within the 1.5 warming pathway and avoid serious or catastrophic outcomes for the planet and for us. And they also are now saying that even with the great initiatives or the ambitions by governments in order to move to renewable energies and become more effective and efficient, that if we continue to consume and grow, we may stay in the same place, not making any headway. In fact, in a recent Guardian article, Jason Hickel wrote that the rich nations devour about 28 tons of material per person per year. And the scientists there argue that's 4 times what they think is the sustainable level. So my question is, what role can and should we as consumers play in combating climate change? If we knew the specific climate impacts of each of our purchases, such as the greenhouse gas emissions of our favorite dress or shoes, would we make more climate-friendly purchases? Or maybe even buy less clothing overall? And would the companies who make fashion and apparel products, now knowing that we know the climate impacts of our clothing purchases, would they offer more climate-friendly options? Ultimately, the question is, can consumption and effective climate action go hand in hand, or are we just kidding ourselves? So I'm lucky to have with me Johan Pihl and Jacob Odqvist, 2 entrepreneurs who are developing a number of solutions that they say will make it easier for you and me, as customers, to fight climate change. Welcome, Johan and Jacob, or Jakob as they say in Swedish.
Hello.
Thank you.
So you both represent a company called Doconomy, right? So I think it's an interesting and strange name. And I guess the do represents action of some sort, and the economy implies, well, I guess money, right?
Yeah.
Tell us more about this. What is Doconomy?
Well, starting off with what you just said, I mean, the main purpose of the economy is making people aware of their carbon footprint and then allowing them tools to offset their footprint and in the end also take responsible actions and cutting down on their consumption. So Doconomy is sort of the umbrella for various services that we're developing, and the first one is actually our banking app, which is Do. And in the core, it's a credit card with an app that will track your consumption, allow you to take responsible action, and also allow you to compensate through either UN or to invest the equivalent amount into sustainable funds in order to become have a more sustainable lifestyle.
So I think we had this concept where it's all about reducing your carbon footprint, but obviously consumption will still go on. So you need to compensate for the consumption you're having. So it's both actually. It's reducing and compensating.
Very interesting. So how did you come about with this idea? How did it get started? Because it seems so elegant. And yet it hasn't really happened before, as I understand. There's not other organizations really driving this kind of approach. So where did this start? How did it get started?
With the work we did for Ålandsbanken.
Ålandsbank.
Yeah, Ålandsbanken. And Ålandsbanken is obviously, I would consider, world leading in sustainability with their work for the Baltic Sea. And I worked together with Mattias Wikström at RBK on a project where we wanted to connect a credit card to basically allow for donations for the Baltic Sea. Okay. So that's the starting points, actually figuring out what's the most innovative kind of credit card we can come up with. And Mattias and his team later developed what's referred to as Åland Index. And Åland Index is the very first time one is able to calculate the impact based on each transaction on a credit card. which was
and then allocated to a category, right?
And that was highly exposed as a great innovation, basically. So I think the economy is, it's that taking that project and adding a lot more to it as a separate service.
So it sounds like the Ålands Index was the first innovation.
Just to give you some more information on that, it's basically the ability to measure the carbon impact of each transaction, and that goes on the information of the data from credit cards on category, which means that if you go to a restaurant, that's what we know. We know it's a restaurant, and that's why we can calculate the money spent in that category based on that whole category's overall impact. So that gives you a number.
And if it would be buying food at a grocery store, there's a category for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how it works.
Is that a global categorization? Is there a standard for that, or is that something that the Åland Bank with you have developed?
It was developed. It's obviously the effort of many different industry players coming together to make that happen. But the innovation, the ability to put it together was actually the project.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
and to display it as well, so you can basically get your carbon footprint calculation and divide it into categories as well, so you can see where you might be over-consuming or overspending, and you can also see where you're doing a good job.
So in restaurants, I could get 20% of my carbon footprint going out to eat at night, and 40% from buying food, and X% for buying clothes. Okay. So let's get a little bit more concrete, because you started to do that when you talked about the service.
Yeah.
But tell me concretely, how do the services work that you are offering now, or that you're intending to offer?
Yeah, I think the starting point is still the credit card, and I think that's important because sometimes it's a bit controversial of sorts. I mean, if you back up, you understand that the credit card was actually a tool to increase consumption. And now we're using it for the very opposite, to decrease consumption.
So we've created the world's worst credit card.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I'm sure Ålands Bank is very happy.
Yeah, they're happy. So that the starting point is the credit card. It's also our ability to be very close to the problem we're trying to solve. We're in the store. We're with you when you're actually purchasing something. So that's important, and that's where we collect the data on the same. It's the same construction as the project we did for Ålandsbanken. And then we calculate the impact and display that in an app. So you're fully aware of your impact. That's the starting point. And then what we're doing, we're offering climate compensation through the UN, and also investments in sustainability.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are two ways of offsetting your footprint, either by putting it into UN projects or to put money into sustainable investments.
So I buy something, and in my app it translates those purchases into a greenhouse gas impact factor of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, you will get the transaction displayed in the app with two different price tags, or two prices. So basically the money that the transfer or the transaction cost you, but also the CO2 it entails. And that CO2 is also recalculated into monetary value.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's based on a percentage dictated by the Åland Index.
Okay. So let me back up just a little bit, and then we'll come back to the details. Yeah. But it sounds to me like because I asked you, how did you come up with this idea? Well, you mentioned how it built on previous work, but there's also a theory of impact or change that's built into this. Yeah. Somehow I'm getting a sense that you saw a need for consumers to be able to see visually their impact. So tell us a little bit about why you think that's needed. Yeah,
I mean, we all know by now that the average Swede has about 11 tons a year in impact, and that's a huge number. But obviously, it's very hard to relate to. I mean, it has to be specified on on consumption, on energy spending, even on in savings, investments. You have to understand the 11 tons of impact. So that's
it needs to be put in a context.
Yeah, context
before we can ask people to do something about it.
Yeah, and understand this. It's clear what we need to do. As you started, we need to cut that in half. Okay, so if you translate that to your shopping list, your lifestyle, it's going to affect your lifestyle, and so that's where it started. We need to have a super smart tool that connects consumption to its impact.
Starting with then we had this fantastic tool in Åland Index, but it didn't actually provide you with a good action afterwards and how to. So now I know my footprint, and we've integrated that into a credit card, which can actually track exactly any type of transaction you might do. But now we also provide the consumer with 2 alternatives to make that change.
Right, and those alternatives where you could either offset your emissions through a mechanism that's a standard globally, or you can put that money into a number of I don't know if you would call them sustainability funds.
Yes.
Okay.
One can also add that the reason why this is now a separate company and a new service is that the ability to actually do more. I mean, we've been playing around with a concept where we set limits, like a budget. That
like a carbon budget.
Yeah, so there's so many possibilities when we actually control the product ourselves. So I think that the platform of sorts we're building now, the starting point, measuring transactions, making people aware of their footprint, helping them, compensate and reduce over time. That's the basic service still. So we like to think that the services that we will put out will be even more, innovative.
So beyond this basic start,
Yeah.
Once people get a sense of what their impacts are, and you say, well, you actually as an individual have only this budget. If you're going to stay within the 50% reductions, here are some companies, organizations, solutions that may be able to enable you to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Gamification.
Okay. Right.
There's so much potential, but what we're doing differently, I think, is that we're starting with a very very specific product that is actually measuring transactions. It's not. This is not about. It's actually data. We're collecting data, and we're giving you an exact idea of your carbon footprint. That needs to be the starting point, because if that's not, the precision is super important in order to do other things. So.
And there are fantastic climate calculators out there today already, but they're usually based on an average year. How many times would you assume that you fly on an airplane, for example? Yeah. So it's very hypothetical. Now,
self-reported.
It's exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Now we're actually you use this card that day in this category, and that gave you this amount of
in psychology, it's just consciousness, or your ability to be aware. I mean, it's I think that if people are going to use our service, are going to say, wow, I didn't know I was flying 8 times a year. It's stuff like that. It's raw data.
So you imagine a lot of ahas from us as
I mean, we're speaking from experience. When we started this, I mean, the whole team has actually got a completely different outlook on their own footprint. Yeah. And we're supposed to be people in the know, but it's once it's there on the paper, I mean, it's
you can't debate it.
No, you can't.
Right. So let me ask a few more challenging questions, because of course this is a really interesting idea and a great initiative. Of course, when you get into the details, right, the classic devils in the details, there are questions about the legitimacy of the calculations. There's questions about the impacts, for instance, of the offsetting or the fund. So how do you guys really ensure that the offsetting or the investment funds will make an impact? How do you think about that piece?
I mean, we've chosen for the offsetting projects the most credible partner we can have, and that's the UN. And we only offer climate compensation through their gold standard project. So that's, I mean, in terms of credibility, that's as good as it gets.
Right. So that's the best available today. Yeah.
And then there's always the debate whether climate compensation is just damage control, and that in a sense that's true. But what we say first and foremost is that you need to address the issue of your consumption. So you need to consume less. But we're realistic about you can't stop all consumption. So you need to take responsibility for the consumption that you actually do.
No.
Yeah. So cut your consumption and then compensate for what's left.
Okay.
And that will make an impact.
And to how we calculate on transaction, the precision is obviously not on product level. We know that, it's just, it won't give you information on, it won't separate one restaurant from another,
right,
or one brand from another. But obviously, since we're building this platform, we're going to allow that type of data to be used on our platform.
So that's the ambition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, right.
And that's so important for us to stress. You have to build a platform that allows for new data to enter, basically, and the data we're aiming for is basically on product level.
So that's very interesting. So today, if I go into a grocery store and I buy sort of ecological meat or sort of eco, I'm not going to see a difference today on that versus the sort of traditional choices. No. But ultimately, the goal is to start to have that level of nuance. And that's part of the challenge and mission.
Yeah, and the potential. And the real potential, I would say. I mean, we imagine a year from now, a consumer would hold two products and not only look at the price tag, they would actually look at the impact. And understanding the connection between impact, sustainable production, and how that affects the price. Maybe they will come to the conclusion that, hey, this is locally produced, and it gives a much higher price, and that's the situation we want to create. Basically, we want to inspire and promote. That's also why we have this name. The economy. We want to inspire a new type of economy.
And also, it opens the possibility for brands and producers, let it be clothing or groceries, to compete and use traceability and transparency as a competitive advantage.
Interesting. So let's get into that, because our listeners work with textiles, clothing, apparel.
Yeah.
So how could you imagine, and that's why I'm fascinated, how could you imagine this working in our industry?
Yeah. Right now you have a few really powerful brands doing proper studies on impact. It could be LCA, it could be industry analysis, all of that. The only thing we're trying to do is to actually create a platform where we could receive data or calculations and connect that to the consumer. So basically, when you buy a product, you should know the impact. And if we could incentivize that or make that into a loyalty program that you actually buy more from a brand that is totally transparent with their impact, that's a good thing, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult for society or companies like ourselves to demand responsible behavior from a consumer or from a brand, for that matter, when there is a gap in knowledge.
Yeah.
So our first job is to make people aware on the impact, and that's promoting transparency. And that's showcasing to be quite difficult because you have a big barrier in order to make like a proper LCA. So we need to see how we can make that, how we can cut that into chunks and bite-sized pieces to make it easier. And then we need to translate that into the consumer as well. So basically the brand and consumer operate on the same level.
So
and then we can start. Then we can start demanding people to take responsible decisions.
right. So I'm just thinking in a very basic idea. If I go in and buy a pair of socks
Yeah.
from a particular
Yeah.
brand, I'm going to get a sense of the climate impact of those socks
Yeah.
and the amount it would cost, according to your model,
Yeah.
to compensate or to use that money to invest in a sustainable fund.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question is, where does the company who sold those socks to me, where do they come in? So they could potentially what? Could they take responsibility for
Yeah.
that offsetting?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're almost thinking of it as a discount, and I love actually using these words because they were all used to increase consumption, and we're using
Credit cards and discounts.
Yeah, and loyalty programs. We're doing all of that, but we're just flipping it. So basically, when you buy a product, it would be easy for that company to offer the amount needed to climate compensate. And anyone that says, that's going to lead to more consumption, you have to remember that they just put their negative impact on the planet on their price tag,
Okay.
which is a huge step. So it's actually introducing awareness on the basis of understanding the commercial market.
Okay. So it is an interesting setup there and,
Yeah.
and something that has to be
Yeah.
thought through in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of behavior.
Yeah.
Because imagine, sorry for just
Yeah.
driving on here,
No.
but imagine the company I buy from
Yeah.
pays for the compensation and I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Does that incentivize me to buy less, to buy differently?
That's a super interesting question. And honestly, and we always end up talking about this, we think that instead of kind of finding an aggressive way to kind of control that situation, we would like to trust people and consumers in the fact that once they're aware and they understand, we think that they will make more intelligent choices. It's basically talking about conscious consumption, because the biggest mistake you can make is to try to figure out a way to block behavior. We're not going to do that. If someone asks us, will someone use our service and consume more? It's possible, but we need to have a service that is actually doing what it's supposed to do without any moral or ethical, ideas. It's giving you the information you need to make intelligent choices. If you decide not to, it's
an interesting philosophy
Yeah.
and fair enough. I think
Yeah.
some may argue
Yeah.
getting the pricing right
Yeah.
is what's going to really make a difference. So if it costs more for a company to have a product that's higher climate impact, they need to get the incentive to reduce that so that it's cheap and for the same for the customer.
And I think it's all going to level out.
Right.
Yeah. So like another example is like, okay, so you're looking at a price tag and you see that it has a low impact, because of sustainable production, and a high price tag, obviously because of sustainable production. And then you have the next product with high impact and a low price. Would you pick the one with the highest impact because it would give you the most climate compensation? So we're looking at that now, and quick question or a quick answer to that question is to actually find that it's based on the price. So it would be more or less the same. Yeah.
Okay. So that's an important point.
Yeah, it's an interesting way.
Yeah, very interesting.
And also I think that right now we're developing this, and we need this to grow a life of its own. We're not at all worried that this, actually getting brands to be totally transparent on impact. That's a huge step.
And it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's going to take a while, and any way we could do that, it's gonna raise the awareness of the consumer. So that's a good thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's step back again and talk about the innovative nature of your initiative and the digital banking service. So again, are there any other credit card companies or credit card offerings that are like this in the world?
No.
Nothing else.
No. I mean, there are new banking services. We see them popping up everywhere, but not with the circular effect, and that has taken our perspective on solving climate change.
So there's no other card where I can get my climate impacts reported to me?
Not that we know of.
Okay, so that's pretty important in terms of giving transparent feedback to people. Is something changed? And here I'm thinking about fintech, right? The financial technology. What's different now, you think, given that you're now in this world, from a few years ago that makes this possible? Because the idea is elegant enough that it shouldn't be rocket science. Here's something we can do. So what's happening now?
I mean, what we see, it's a literal revolution within fintech right now. When we see neobanks popping up everywhere, and the gathering that they're collecting over a short amount of time, it's massive. You have the UK and Momondo and Revolut and N26. There are a couple of ones in Sweden as well now, and they're taking ground from the traditional banks, and looking at what they do is they have an outstanding consumer interface. So they're taking away sort of the baggage that the old banks come with, and they're just offering a superior customer experience.
And to add to that, I mean, what they're doing is they're making consumption faster and easier. We're not doing that.
But we're building on the same structure.
Absolutely.
That if we're going to do a successful banking service, it needs to play according to that rule book. But we put another layer, and that's the higher purpose of saving.
But also it's important to understand that if you start off with saying, let's find a way to reduce carbon emissions by half, let's just help consumers reduce their carbon footprint. You start an organization. You don't start, you don't put out a credit card. So what we did was a different take on how to approach the problem completely. Basically aligning with the companies that are making, consumption faster and easier, which is, a contradiction, but it's exactly where we need to be.
So I can imagine, obviously, with startups, sort of when a big behemoth decides, okay, look at this is something we have to do. They could easily come in and say, we're going to do this ourselves. As someone who wants to change the world in terms of climate impacts, I'd say, great. You guys have stimulated them to take this up. Do you have that vision, or where do you think in terms of competition? I mean, you are a commercial company. So is there a vision, a mission that you could see, we've succeeded even if we haven't succeeded our own organization, this has become a standard? Or what's your hopes there?
It's sort of like a double-edged sword, because in the greater good of things, it would be fantastic for a big player to come in, because then they would have even bigger traction than we might have at this point. On the other hand, we have the first mover advantage, basically. So down the road, there's a big possibility that we might be able to provide banks, for example, with this service.
Great.
Because we've already started, so we will become like a plugin for them. And then if you want to be a pure do or economy client, you can be a customer, you can be there as well.
So then imagine 5 years from now, which, if we have to do major changes in 10 years, I'm giving you only 5 years.
Good.
What do you think? Where do you want to be?
I think that, we're hoping for, regulations and taxation. We're hoping for, big change, industry level change. That's what we're hoping for. And I think that's going to affect, have a huge effect on society as a whole. But at the same time, there's a market for a consumer service like this. And I think that, and it's also interesting because the way people will, relate to their carbon footprint, we don't really know. I mean, we're about to change behavior, but we're not really sure what that's gonna, what it's gonna mean to the average consumer.
No, but hopefully we will become, or have started to help introducing a new type of standard on how people look at their carbon footprint. In all aspects of their lifestyle, not just picking the ecological meat from the meat
section.
Thank you, in the store. But also looking, where do I place my savings? How do I plan for the future, etc. And what really gets me going is the fact that we have so much untapped potential in our how we place our savings.
I could imagine that the data that you gather can be used by lots of different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Policymakers could say, oh, well, look directly. Today they look at the statistics bureaus and try to make sense, but this would even be more nuanced information. And you could say, look, people are consuming all this and your policies aren't really making a difference. What should we do here? New innovative companies or solutions could say, how do we provide this service that people want without having the same climate impact? So I can imagine that just the data mining aspect of this could be very helpful.
I think honestly the greatest ideas based on this platform is yet to be explored.
Yeah.
Because it's when you actually we like to think of it that we take impact data and we convert it into a currency of itself. And the things you can do with that is just amazing.
Well, I want to say to you, thank you for inspiring us, because it is a very interesting idea. And as you said, it's just in the beginning, and you're learning as you go along, and there'll be a lot of adapting and changing probably along the way. But I think it's interesting to explore what this could mean for our industry, the apparel and textiles industry. And for you listening out there, we want to hear what you think, of course. So don't hesitate to reach out to us with your feedback, comments, or ideas around this. What do you think? What are its opportunities, its challenges? You can reach us at bigclosets@sustainablefashionacademy.org. Jacob, or Jakob, as we say in Swedish. Johan?
Yes.
Johan.
Thank you for having us.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being here.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.